I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. We're focusing on retiring faculty and staff members at Missouri Southern, kind of a subtitle, Southern Reflections. And today we're visiting the beginning of the program with Chrys Corcoran with the nursing department. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And I'd like to take time on these programs to visit with people that have been involved in campus for a number of years. And you've been in the School of Nursing since shortly before 2000.
Yes, I started as an adjunct, and then I really liked it. I so happy that they invited me in, and then I came back a year later, took a one-year contract, and then just stayed. Applied for a tenured position and have been happy here ever since.
Well, I'd like to also ask people at the beginning of the program their initial interest in their field, because we have such a variety of retirees this year. But what sparked your initial interest in nursing?
I think I wanted to be a nurse ever since I was a little kid. I wanted to be a nurse and I wanted to be a teacher. And who knew at the end of my life I got to do both. Nursing's a wonderful profession, or even vocation. It's very varied. You can be a bedside nurse, a nurse in the community, a nurse in critical care, a nurse in long-term care, or a teacher.
So you got your nursing degree, obviously, and then you decided to go on for higher education in the field.
I worked as a nurse. It was a great profession, especially when my kids were little. Shift work's not as bad as some people think it can be. Of course, it's not always great either, but I worked as a nurse in the emergency room for off and on for 30 years.
And so then you got the higher education in nursing.
I did. I went back and got my master's and was invited to do a guest lecture here at Missouri Southern. After that, I was called, and I'd started doing some community education in my job at the hospital, and so they said, well, your role as an educator rolls right into higher ed.
So the role of teaching tomorrow's nurses, tell me about that aspect. I mean, there's so many different aspects of nursing. People don't realize the different choices they have as they come into nursing school.
They do. Most of us start out as a generalist, and we go to nursing school, and through that, and many times the students come in and they think, oh, I want to do pediatrics, or I'm going to do long-term care, but then as they go through their clinicals and their generalist education, they find an area. Often they'll say to me, oh, I didn't know I'd like this area so well. And as they have the opportunity to experience different, pediatrics, OB, acute care, emergency rooms, intensive care units, just all the different areas, hospice, community care, they suddenly decide that, oh, I really do have a passion for this area, and they have the opportunity to go to work there.
Now, I know I have the opportunity oftentimes to work with freshmen in one of our classes on campus, and a lot of students you see as freshmen coming in, and do you find it common that they have that same thought that you had from the beginning, I want to be a nurse? They've had that dream all their life?
Sometimes they do. Interestingly, some will share an experience that influenced them to go into nursing, like they had a family member require health care, they had an experience where they were ill and had a broken bone, or a nurse has come into their life and made a difference, and then that's kind of influenced them to pursue that career.
Now, I know, like many fields, nursing has changed tremendously throughout the years. Reflect back on when you first came here at Southern and how you're teaching now compared to then.
Oh, it's very different. Just the technology and teaching itself. The computers and many computer-based programs, computer simulations. We chatted a bit about the simulation lab, the human simulation lab. So used to, you took this static mannequin, basically a doll, and said, okay, now pretend you're doing these things. Where now we have these high-tech mannequins that you put a stethoscope on their chest, you can hear them breathe, their eyes blink, you shine a light in their eyes and their pupils constrict, and they have microphones that come out of them. So you might say it's kind of hard to, how do you engage with a mannequin and pretend that it's really real? But when that mannequin's talking back to you, and suddenly you're worrying that that mannequin's blood pressure is falling, or they're bleeding, or they're crying because they hurt, your nursing instinct takes over, and you begin to, talk about what can I do to make this better.
So the technology has played a major role. I imagine that also helps the students, kind of that hands-on experience as well that you have to have as nursing training.
I kind of liken it to practice. You wouldn't go into a basketball game and walk up to the free throw line if you've never tried to shoot a basket. And we're the same way in nursing. We try to give them the opportunity first in the skills lab, where you do the manipulation of how to hold a needle and how to work a stethoscope and how to work a blood pressure cuff.
The mechanics of things.
The mechanics of things, exactly. And then, once you get that down, then you go practice it on a real person. Some things they can do to each other. They can take each other's blood pressures or listen to each other's hearts. Other things, it's really nice to have a mannequin if you're going to start an IV on it.
Right, right. So the step from the classroom to actually going into a medical facility, a hospital, and firsthand where they're interacting with patients is probably a big one as well then.
And we try really hard to make it just like what the real thing will be. I'm currently doing nursery simulations where I try to mimic exactly what they're going to do when they walk into the nursery.
Okay. Well, when you see a student coming into the nursing program, what sort of qualities are you looking for a student who will then be a nurse tomorrow?
Well, we could take that two directions. You could say, really what we want is caring. And often the comment they make is, I want to help people. But it's an art and it's also a science. And so they have to have good grades. They have to do math. They have to do more than just pass their biology classes, anatomy, physiology, chemistry, microbiology, pathophysiology. So they take psychology. Nursing borrows from many different disciplines.
So they have to be a well-rounded student.
Very well-rounded, and then be able to put all of that together, think on their feet, and then still care about people.
Now, do you have opportunities for some of your former students to interact with you, or they come back to see you, or do you visit them when you're in the community?
Both. Sometimes they come back. We have a nursing honor society, which some of them are active in, so that's always, it's getting ready to happen today, as a matter of fact. And some of them will come back. And then when we take students into the clinical environment, often they're with Missouri Southern grads.
The Honor Society sounds interesting. You're actually recognizing those who kind of go above and beyond a little bit on the academic side as well.
Yes, yes, and we're working towards a national chapter. Right now it's a Missouri Southern chapter. There's steps to that process.
Right. Now, a lot of people also as nurses want to know, what about the job opportunities? We hear that that's a field in demand. We've heard that for many years. Is that something you continue to see in the
It
education?
continues to see 100% of our graduates get jobs. Not a lot of professions can brag on that. Sometimes it's not exactly where they wanted to go. Currently, the current practice is not to take brand new nurses, for example, into the intensive care unit. So they may go to school saying, I want to be an ICU nurse, but they really need to spend a few months out on a medical floor and really get their skills and time management skills honed before they move into a more critical area.
So they work their way up within their field once they get that job and working together along those lines. Well, what do you enjoy the most of when you're working with these students as an instructor or professor?
Oh, I think it's that, like people say, that light bulb moment when they say, oh, I understand this now. And you see them do a skill, or you see them interact and come back and talk about, I think I could see myself as a nurse in this area. Or I did that. I came through and performed when I didn't know if I could or not.
So when graduation time comes around and you're able to see them leave Missouri Southern and go to work, they have that sense of pride with them.
They do. We're getting ready for our pinning ceremony, which has a long tradition in nursing. Some people say, oh, it doesn't have a place in higher ed. That's something they did back in Florence Nightingale's days. But it's a personal ceremony within the nursing department where they receive their pin, which that's very traditional. You could trace the roots back to the Crusades almost. But it's just our school. It's their friends. They've gone through this program, this difficult program together, and now they're graduating.
And so they've built that camaraderie, that support system within their class, working together.
And you look at them they come into the program as a junior, that first semester junior year, and you look at them, you put them in a clinical group, and then you realize that these may be lifetime friendships that are forming right now because they bond together in that first clinical experience, and then maybe have other classes together, or intentionally schedule together, carpool together, study together, and then graduate
together and keep track of each other's careers as they move along. So in the classroom, an important part of your job, and that you're going to be able to continue that to some extent with retirement. I mean, you're having a phased retirement, as we call it.
I'm really excited about that. It's a great opportunity that the school is offering us. And I'll do a 3-year phased retirement. I'll teach 6 credit hours, which is a half load. And some people elect to do it as a lecture class. I think most people do. But I asked if I could continue doing clinical in the simulation lab, which is an area I really enjoy. So I'll do my clinical load will be predominantly in the sim lab.
So you'll be still working hands-on with the students and seeing where they're applying those skills that you're teaching and working together. So what would you say is a tip for success for a potential student wanting to come into the nursing program?
tenacity. Stick with it, because it's a tough program, and it's not easy. You know, you see sad things, and then you turn around and see really cool miracle things.
Right. So really that personality of the person who's involved. You mentioned psychology. There's a lot of different elements that come into being successful.
There are.
And tying that together. Looking at Missouri Southern, you have a building that's still, I call it fairly new, the Health Sciences building on campus. You've seen a lot of changes here on campus. The support for the campus and the community for the medical field seems to have grown quite a bit over the years.
It has. You know, just with the naming and the names that are on the building, you think about the people behind them that give to our community. We're the McCune Brooks Health Science Nursing Department. I think I just butchered that name, but that foundation gave to the nursing department. And we've got a name on the simulation lab. It's not without those funds we couldn't have the great educational programs that we have. People come to our school and they look at the sim lab and they say, wow, you have a really, you know, for a program of only 60 students a class, you have a really nice simulation lab.
So it helps set Missouri Southern apart from other schools.
It definitely does.
Any special memory that you have that stands out then on your time here at Missouri Southern that you'd like to share?
Oh, that's tough.
I know you've worked with students, you've done a lot of different things, you know. So
yeah, you know, we went through the tornado in that building and saw it give real care, and the things that we talked about in the building of the building happened. And we were able to come through with that. So that was a big moment, seeing the students step up and the faculty step up, and then coming back and now we teach in that building, and it's like, this is a real place. We really do give care here.
Great. So carrying through for the future. Retirement plans, you mentioned the phased retirement, so you'll be able to have a little bit of free time versus what you have now.
I'm pretty excited about that too. I'm going to take a class. You know, I'm going to take advantage of the tuition break that we give employees and take a photography class. So I'm really looking forward to that. I've had this camera that I've kind of messed with for years, and now I'm going to figure out what all those little dials are for.
So that's kind of one of those bucket list items that people talk about. When I retire, I'm going to do this.
Bucket list. I'm going to learn to use my camera. I'm going to do some gardening. I'm going to do more sailing and sewing, and be able to have the luxury of, when I teach the class, not be hurried, be able to be well prepared. And
so retirement being something that you're looking forward to.
I definitely am.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your service to Missouri Southern, and thank you for coming to the program today.
Thank you. Missouri Southern's been very good to me.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank our viewers for joining in on this portion of the program, and I invite you to stay tuned, because we'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to Newsmakers. We're continuing our visit with retiring faculty members at Missouri Southern. Joining me on this portion of the program, Stephan Schiavo with the Computer Information Science Department. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I guess we need to start off with, let's set the tone, let people know about your current position. You're a professor in computer information science?
Yes, I'm a full professor in the department. I've been there 16 years, and I'm still the new guy.
So that department, I know, has seen a lot of changes throughout the years, I imagine, computer science.
Yeah, considerably. Things like, in the time I've been here, the speed of the network has increased 1,000 times. There have been probably 6 different versions of the software that we teach and things like that. Yeah.
Well, let's start for people with some background. And what sparked your interest in that field in the first place?
Oh, goodness.
First years of there's a lot of fields, places where people can work. Why did you say,
You mean from the very beginning?
Yeah, what sparked your interest in computers?
Well, hoping not to make it a long story, I was at infantry school as a second lieutenant in Fort Benning, and we were almost literally lining up to get on the airplane to head to Southeast Asia. And this major come along and picked me and one other guy out of the line, essentially, and said, "You had a class in computers in college, didn't you?" I said, "Well, yeah." He says, "Good, you're now going to go work for the National Security Agency." So that's where I spent the Vietnam War, with the National Security Agency. My daughter was born in Okinawa. But anyway, I got into high-tech business one way or another there.
Right.
And when I came out, I ended up in the industry. So I had 25 years in corporate life.
So the corporate life and then a transition to higher education. How did that come about?
Well, I actually went from corporate life to private practice for 8 years, and that involved some training of people. And I ended up volunteering at Schreiner College in Kerrville, Texas. And they had a great program where students with a diagnosed learning disability, once they graduated from high school, they could have full-time tutoring at the university to help them get through it. And I was one of those volunteer tutors, and I got friendly with the administration, so the president asked me to become the director of computers. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I ended up teaching a class, and when he retired, I moved to the University of the Incarnate Word in San Antonio, where I was teaching more full-time. I was the director of the evening degree completion program, and ended up as the chairman of the department before I transferred up here.
So coming to Missouri Southern, what brought you to Joplin?
Dr. Oaks. I think this is probably the first job I had in 30 or 40 years where I went to work for strangers. Normally in the corporate world, you go to work for somebody you know, and so
people,
forth.
Things like that, right?
But I saw an ad probably in the Chronicle and applied, and Dr. Oaks brought me up for a visit. And I came to work here in August of 2001.
So right before the start of the semester that year. So you've been here ever since, obviously. And, just kind of paint a picture for us. In 2001, the world of computer information science compared to today, you know, some changes, but what kind of equipment did you have to work with? I know computers have changed a lot since then too, but what are you facing?
The equipment isn't so much different, except that it gets faster and bigger and faster and bigger. Those on campus who were around then will remember we didn't have Banner. We had a homegrown system that looked very much like the 1970s. It was white capital letters on a black background and a very awkward interface and so forth.
User-friendly, as we say.
No, it was actually user-hostile. So a few years later, when was it, maybe 2005 or so, they brought in Banner, which is dramatically different, and the folks here installed Lionnet on top of that. So technology became more visual, more user-friendly, began to look more like a video game. Okay. Other things that have happened is we've gone, certainly from my corporate days, where creating an application was the job of 6 or 10 people working for 6 months in some crowded, probably padded room, to now where they have different techniques for how humans interact with computers. Agile is one of the terms they use, and it's a number of different techniques for rapid development of applications, which have proved pretty effective. Okay.
So the students you've been able to work with over the years, they obviously, you know, they're interested in computers and they're training for tomorrow. Have you seen a lot of students, the change in any students over the years, the ones that you had in the early days?
I would say the change in their qualifications and their aspirations hasn't been that dramatic, certainly not that I would have ever made note of. I'm always impressed how the traditional students arrive here kind of gangly and uneasy and all that sort of thing, and 4 years later I'm surprised to find them worthy of everybody's respect and grown up and ready to recommend them to take a corporate job somewhere. So that's always been a pleasant part of the job. We also have a number of non-traditional students, some of whom are pretty remarkable, and some of whom are trying to find another way to direct their life after the Navy or being a housewife or things like that. And this is still a field where if you've got the the ability for it, you can go to work at any age, any gender, any place you want.
So still a high demand field. People are out
Absolutely.
there looking for your graduates.
In good times and bad, this has been a high demand field.
Are you finding that the students, the traditional students that are coming out of high school now with a lot of computer background already, they learn in kindergarten how to use computers, that it helps them when they come in the door?
Actually, I'm surprised that that's not as much the case as I would have thought. Certainly from the school districts around here,
Right.
they have surprisingly little exposure to writing programs, even at the most rudimentary level. Surprisingly little opportunity to attend any kind of what you might think of as a computer class. And for many of them, when they arrive here, this is their first experience with learning about information systems in an academic environment.
So they're users more than applying and developing.
Yes, indeed, and we do a little bit of trimming out the first year among students who are great users of Facebook and Twitter and that sort of thing, and they come to find out maybe they're not as interested in the underside of the computer business as they thought they might have been.
So the courses you have taught over the years, a lot of hands-on opportunities for the students where they're applying what you're learning?
Some of the courses, yes, some not. A lot of us get into the role of teaching similar courses time and time
Kind of
again,
routine,
and
right.
then adding odd things on the side. I have always taught Information Systems 1 and 2. The one is an entry-level course, broad overview of everything they need to know about the industry. And Information Systems 2 is a senior level course. It's entirely dedicated to systems analysis and design, learning how people solve business and organizational problems with information. The other is Database 1 and 2, the first of which is an absolute programming course.
They're going to be learning programming.
Hands-on from the very first day, and it's all projects. As a matter of fact, I go to some lengths to introduce them to what my exams look like before finals, because they've never had an exam from me. And they come out of that actually with you might think of it, a toolbox full of techniques that they can use for any eventuality.
Naturally carry over for them.
And Database 2 is what we've come to think of as the capstone course. It's the spring of their senior year, and they actually identify and complete an application for somebody in the real world. A company here in town, maybe one of the academic departments, maybe the family business, things like that.
So a practical application of what they're learning. They can see
One hopes, yes.
tying that together. Well, looking at students who've graduated over the years, how does it feel to have graduates come back that you can see? Do you follow their careers? Do you look where they're
A number of them, yes. I count myself fortunate that a number of them stay in touch with me. Let me know where they're going, what they're doing. Several of them are local success stories. They've started little companies that have become bigger companies, and they're succeeding pretty nicely. A number of them are managers in the larger companies around here, from Leggett to Jack Henry to Walmart to Tamco and stuff like that. It is good to see them grow into functioning adults in the workplace and taking much more responsibility. As a matter of fact, if they come back a year or two later, they already know more than I do about a lot of the business. So
there's a learning curve once they leave here. They're
absolutely,
learning so much more.
yes. Absolutely.
Well, what do you say for the students as they come in, and what are their tips for success when you look at the field of computer information science? What does it take? What does it take for a student or someone to succeed in that field?
Gosh, I'm trying to think how to say this nicely. Attending class regularly is a big help. Performing the assignments and following instructions is really good the first year or so. Thereafter, if they're keen, as the Canadians used to say, if they're really into this stuff, then of course I urge them to dig into it and learn as much as they can, go beyond the current assignment, just as you would do in a number of other courses. Follow this thing further down the path and see what you get out of it. And a number of them, certainly those who are going to succeed later, do that. And as I said, they end up before long knowing more about it than I do.
So that curiosity as a student carries through to their careers, and curiosity
certainly does.
Well, the question I like to ask everyone as they're approaching retirement are plans for retirement. What happens after you leave Missouri Southern?
We bought a house right on the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in western North Carolina. It's got a lovely view of the mountains and the woods, and we're a couple of miles from waterfalls and scenic overlooks and Blue Ridge Parkway, and it's a beautiful place to be. It's near my daughter. It's just a great place to live as far as we can tell. And we've researched a number of places from California to Colorado to Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont, and I think we found the best one.
Great. Well, what will you miss most about Missouri Southern when you leave, when you look back in memories or reflecting on the university?
Certainly friends. I've developed a number of good friends, mostly on this end of the campus rather than the other end. It's surprising. It just happened that way. Everywhere from the psychology department to the English department to the drama department to the music department, art department. They're just people in the social sciences, a number of folks who are just great folks, high quality people, funny, delight to be around. As a matter of fact, one of them, I married him to his wife, and he married me to my wife. So
you know each other really well.
It's that kind of friendship where you get very close to people, and I'll miss a lot of them to the point where we've made it real clear to people we've got a couple of guest rooms, and we're looking forward to seeing folks that come to visit.
You're going to give them your address to visit as you follow and visit along those lines.
Other than that, just traveling around. We like to travel around the country, take long road trips out west, up north, stuff like that. There's a lot of places that I haven't seen, a lot of places my wife hasn't seen, so we're going to try to resolve that.
So do some of that, they call it the bucket list, things that you've always wanted to do and haven't been able to do, and so forth. And of course, students being a focus at Missouri Southern, I mentioned that being able to interact with the students all these years and have that personal contact with students in the classroom, the small classroom sizes.
I've got a large list of advisees. So I get to see a lot of the students in my office for an extended period of time, and you do develop relationships with them. I wonder how somebody does a job like this for many years without developing a genuine affection for the students. And I think I try not to be paternal, but there certainly is a relationship that develops there.
I know a lot of people I've talked to have mentioned Missouri Southern and the people really making a difference. It sounds like that's also the case with you, not only the students, but the faculty and staff and people you've worked with, and tying that together. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for visiting with us today, and thank you for your service to Missouri Southern over these years.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Great, and wish you the best in retirement. Enjoy it. Thank you. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on the station. We'll see you then.